Today, we'll talk about how to use wearable data to review your past year, but also how to plan for a future year that will hopefully be even a little bit better than past year, or maybe a lot better depending on how your year was. We'll also discuss what we hope will come out in the new year, what kind of data wearables should add to what they already have. This is episode 6 of the Fit for Science podcast. In general, in this podcast, we talk about wearables, quantified self-data, and how we apply that data to live our own life.
Yes, we are Rob and Stephan. We are two passionate biological data scientists, and we especially like data and how to use it in conjunction with science to live our best lives. In general, a quick disclaimer, this podcast represents our own opinions, how we read the data, how we read the literature, and it's for informational purposes only. We are not medical doctors or financial advisors and do not pretend to be ones on the internet, but we definitely want to engage with the community. So if you have any ideas or papers that would update our opinions, we are also very open for that.
Exactly. We're not basically subscribed to any opinion, and we're very open to new data changing our opinions. Let's start with apps and the year in review. If you're subscribed to any app, you will have gotten a year in review. I have them for Aura, Whoop, Strava, Garmin, Spotify. I think you have Apple Music.
I have Apple Music, and I got it as well. I think they copied it from Spotify, right?
Yeah.
Everyone is running around telling me now they're Spotify Music age.
Yeah.
And I don't have that in iTunes, in Apple Music. iTunes aged me now, I think. But Apple Music doesn't provide you with an age. So did you get an age?
I actually didn't check my Spotify one,
okay.
But I think Spotify age is probably the least useful age out of any of the wearables. Like my Whoop age I use on a daily basis almost. But my Spotify age, I really don't care too much.
I think it helps to bridge across generations because I know some very young people who have a Spotify age of 85. And then I have a lot of people from our parents' generation who are now have a Spotify age of 20, and that's really fun.
So you have Aura?
I have Aura, yeah.
And you also get an Aura age?
No, I do not get really an age. I gotta get a cardiovascular age, right? But in terms of Aura's year in review, you also get every year or even every half year a review, and quarters and seasons. I'm not sure what they're doing right now, but this is especially one that always tries to aggregate everything in a very visually appealing manner. But I mean, we get to it maybe not in the most informative manner that is relevant to you, but you get a lot. You said Aura, Whoop, Garmin, Strava, and which one do you like the most? And which have you actually looked at? That's
exactly. Now, I mean, as a preparation for this episode, I looked at most of them. In general, I feel like a lot of these things are made to make you feel good about yourself, because they just say you spend so many hours cycling and that's the same as climbing Everest X times. The Everest is a thing apparently that every app likes to use.
And also how many marathons you ran by walking in steps, something like that. It's funny.
It's cool. It's motivating to a degree, but it's the least useful out of these kind of metrics that you get. Like the more direct metric like a Whoop age, which is totally made up in a way. But to me, that is more useful because I can see what the components are that make it up and if they are useful for me, and try to improve those components. Whereas the year in review that they present to me is less directly useful, because I am also already generally quite happy with a lot of aspects of my sport life. I would say only sleep, I can still have some slight improvement still. I'm in a relatively high percentile of the ranking of users, but I don't necessarily, I'm not always in bed 8 hours. And I think this, for instance, I could improve a bit by just being on my phone less in the evening. And I think this was sort of nice to see that it was actually a bit better than I thought it was.
Yeah.
Like I thought it was even worse. And I think on average it was like 7.5 hours in bed.
Yeah.
But this, I think I could function a little bit better with a little bit more sleep.
Did you do the comparison yourself, where you said I want to check now, you got your year in review and you saw this number of your average sleep per night, and then you went back to 2024 review and checked it? Or did the app actually provide the comparison?
In most cases, I think it didn't provide that comparison, but I just know, 2024 was much the same for me. I think I just know that going on from 2017, 2018, 2019, that's when I was sleeping quite a bit less.
Yeah.
And now it's been relatively consistent for the last 3 to 4 years, I would say.
Yeah, I think trends would be providing more context, such as, for example, trends or direct comparisons to your last year or the same time amount previously would, I think, make this much more useful and relevant. But as you said, they give you numbers on activity, that you ran a marathon, like 10,000 marathons or whatever, you climbed the Mount Everest 50 times or anything else. But sounds fun. It's an interesting anecdote that you can send around, but there is no comparative value. You don't know how did I do last year, like if you compare to yourself, which is, I think, the most important comparison you want to look at. But to some degree, comparisons in your population, like same age or whatever, however you want to stratify the demographics, is also useful, I think, if you just want to know, am I in which percentile? And you just mentioned that in terms of sleeping, you were in a high percentile. But this was relatively. Not in terms of aura, I guess. It was probably a Whoop metric or something else. Or did aura tell you are one of the best sleepers?
No, Whoop was one of the... Like, aura and Whoop are the two that I use consistently every day, basically. But Whoop is the one, because it also has that sport a bit more, that I use a little bit more.
Yeah.
And they told me this, but I guess aura is also more sleep focused, so the population will be a bit different.
Probably, but as far as I recall, aura never provides these kind of population level or community level comparisons, and I think this could help. Obviously, again, we have to be careful. If some people are in a lower percentile, this doesn't make them feel good and maybe demotivating instead of motivating. So I guess they chose then to not compare at all, because, I mean, comparison is, what do the people say? Roots of all bad things.
Yeah, I think comparison, we can look up the quote, but comparison is now that you said root, I don't remember, but it's basically spoils a lot of things.
Exactly.
But what about you? I think I use these metrics and comparisons more on like a day-to-day or week-to-week basis, where I check my Whoop age or how my current 3 or 4 weeks in terms of number of steps, sleeping and stuff compares to the period a little bit before. But I just do it based on what I see in the app. So for instance, like we're using Whoop as an example here, but there's other alternatives, but there you can see 30-day average versus the period like the year before, roughly like the period. And that I also use as sort of a guidance. Sometimes when I see that the last 30 days were a bit worse, then I will try to improve it a bit in the next 30 days. But that's very easy just using the information I have in front of me.
I think that makes also the most sense. I think having always this tighter feedback loop where you get the feedback and then you decide your actions upon that, and you really see immediately the effect is what these devices are most useful for. In terms of yearly review, what I like most about them is when you see something that is, first you see the aggregate across your whole year, but then you also see on a monthly basis all of these, and you see how over a course of a year and across the months this metric, whatever it is, changed. And then you might ask, okay, what has been going on in terms of major events or stresses or good things like vacations in those months, and could this be an strong enough explanatory variable that gives me a clue why this metric improved or got worse. So I always like to have something that is a little bit more fine-grained. I mean, what you just said is the most fine-grained, right, on a weekly basis or monthly basis, but then seeing everything in context and putting that in context with your own last year to some degree, where you know, okay, in these months I was very stressed because of a work event, but then I was on a vacation that was extremely relaxing, but then I was on another vacation that was not relaxing by design. And other life events that we cannot now foresee for everyone, but they might have an effect, and you do see that in the data to some degree, and then you know what to address or not to address. But this is again coming back to, this only makes sense if every month would be exactly the same, such that exactly it reflects this average, that is the aggregate of the year. You would not have any conclusions. So the variation and the differences compared to what makes it meaningful. And this, I think, lags a little bit, that they don't try, or maybe they try and they can't do it. put it in context and really try to keep it motivating. But nevertheless, I would want to know when I get this year in review that they have already 7 years of data from me. So they could say, okay, across the years, we have seen this metric shift significantly and kudos to that. Or we saw that this shifts faster in a bad way, even though it shouldn't move that fast because of aging, for example.
Yeah.
So this would be, this contextualization, because they have the data and they have the ability to do it, that would be something that is really missing.
For me, I would wish they could correlate it with any other information that they have, where they cannot prove causation, but they can say, hey, every time that your cardio fitness decreases, we also see that you were located in this area or whatever. You have to be willing to give them that information, of course.
Obviously.
And then with an American company, the question is, GDPR protection doesn't exist there to the same degree, at least as it does in Europe. But let's say you're fine with giving all that information to a company. If they could see that, okay, every time you spend a significant amount of time here, you're more stressed and you're less fit. And doesn't mean causation, but at least it gives you some information that you might be able to use.
And then design an experiment around it to actually establish causation by just saying, okay, let's try to reproduce this. And if it reproduces, that's then already a higher level of evidence. Yes, definitely. I think they have still more data, coming back also to this previous AI advisor functions that they utilize. So they have actually more data because in Aura you have also the nutrition to some degree. In Whoop you have very detailed exercise information. This could all be put together and then said, hey, if you do a strength workout after 8 p.m., you consistently slept worse. The population level evidence would be, yes, if you get activated, the later you get activated, the harder it is then for you to fall asleep. And even if you say, no, I can do a workout at 10 p.m. and I fall asleep at 11:30, it's no problem. Your sleep architecture might still be disrupted and it takes much longer for your resting heart rate to just go down to your minimum to find your biological middle point in the night, right? And these things, they have all the data. But we always don't know. A population level insight is meaningful and interesting and always triggers me at least to then think about it and investigate it for myself. But I don't know if it applies to me, as we've discussed also with the glucose monitors. There is so much individual variation. And we're really entering this age of personalized data that we collect on a very high density and high frequency manner, that we should be able to do this. And that's to some degree already foreshadowing our last part where I wish all these apps or solutions become more comprehensive in a way.
Yeah, and I mean, we can talk about it more later, but it would be so nice if they could say, hey, you fall into this subgroup of people that actually isn't so much affected by doing a late workout, or that actually sleeps better with a late workout. And then, of course, you don't know for sure if it is because when you do a late workout, you're not on your phone that much or whatever, but it still means that for you, it's working.
This could work, exactly. Yeah, exactly. You're not on your phone, you're not on Netflix or whatever. And it's this kind of compositional thing. Again, it's not, it's zero sum. By adding something in the evening, you remove something from your evening that might be disruptive. For example, junk food snacking would be removed because you made a workout, you made this mindset shift, and maybe you still snack, but you eat something that somehow fuels your workout, or then afterwards rewards your workout, where you're like, I did a strength workout, so I add some protein and not any junk food that I find in the pantry. Definitely, yes. I think there's a lot of room for improvement. Yeah,
for sure.
And I think the reviews, nevertheless, I like them when they pop up. And these reports, that they're also stored in at least in the Aura app, there's a separate section called reports. And just seeing them, they have this monthly, seasonal, quarterly, annual, and anniversary that is tied to your Aura membership. So for every full and half year, you get an anniversary report as well. So I think it's the nice idea and a step in the right direction. So we maybe sound a little bit negative, but I think we both enjoy it to some degree to look at it.
I think there's two parts to it. There's like just the fun part. And a lot of the tracking that I do is also just because it's fun. Like, you have to be into it and not everything needs to be useful. And the fact that it tells me I did 5-month Everest of running or something, it's just fun. You can share it with your friends and maybe you're comparing between the two of you as a fun thing. And that's separate from it being very useful immediately for me now. I think
and actionable, right?
And actionable. Yeah. I think none of my years in review will really change anything for my plans.
Yeah.
It's more these sort of day-to-day variations that I see. And when I see there's an outlier, I try to figure out now for myself often why it is. Sometimes an app like Aura or Whoop will tell me, hey, we saw your resting heart rate was very high and there was no real dip. Could it be that you had a late meal or something? Because I don't log my meals in Aura. And this has happened and this is real and this works. But I think it uses now population level data to make that assessment.
Yeah.
And which it needs to do for that kind of prediction. But that is more useful to me on a day-to-day than a year in review. And a lot of it is me actively figuring it out instead of getting that link from the app.
Yeah. And I think this brings us directly to what has been, and we're very purposeful about this, I think, both of us. What have you checked now? Basically, I mean, chronologically, the year that has passed is also an invention, right? But nevertheless, all of us have this kind of, we kind of look back, we look forward, we do New Year's resolutions, we might do past year reviews. But what have you, and has it triggered for you also to look a little bit at your data? And have you identified something that might have changed or not changed and that is interesting to you across, let's say, the last year? Where you specifically know, okay, I want to check this metric compared to the previous years, or want to see how the time series, like how over time, the temporal pattern evolved. Was there something?
So in general, I have to say I'm very happy with how my year went, and a lot of data made sense to me. I'm still trying to figure out why near the end of the year I had a poorer sleep quality. Mm-hmm. And I just noticed this, and I still don't really know why it was. Especially when I was at my parents', I had really bad sleep scores. And I think this is because of the large amounts of bread I consumed, and especially also at night, because I really love the bread in the Netherlands. And then I was like, I'm only here a few times a year. I can indulge. But it really affected a lot of my sleep score. So I still want to figure out more why those things happen, but it's very specific.
Yeah, but going home over the holidays has many confounders, right?
Exactly.
I mean, you have a different, you even have a different country, different bed, different food, different people around, probably also a lot of different activities, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not your daily work schedule, I guess.
No.
It was more with family and friends meeting up and so on.
Yeah, so that's what I noticed. And I actually stopped tracking a lot of things manually. Like I used to fill out a lot of questionnaires, and I just stopped this because I'd done it for 7 years or so. And I was just like, I will just use automatic data for now. Maybe I'll reintroduce a single question every evening, but it was just too much. And this was actually subjectively a big increase in my happiness. Okay. Just because it took away a big task in the morning and evening that was not needed for me. I did it for this scientific project, but after 7 years, I was like, that's enough data for now at this depth.
Yeah.
And now I will try to implement as much as possible to do automatic tracking with wearables. I still do my weekly MRIs and stuff, which is also a burden. But I think the burden when you're tired at night, filling out this questionnaire was actually quite heavy. Totally. And I didn't realize it.
The barriers, I mean, the fewer barriers and the more automation is in there, the better. I also always try to simplify in this regard.
Yes. And one thing, but that's a bit personal, what I also noticed when I was still filling out these questionnaires, to a degree at least, is that a lot of stress and conflict was gone after, like I had a breakup at the end of 2024, and I didn't realize how much that result, like especially when things were not so good for the last periods, which they weren't terrible, but I didn't feel appreciated, and it was quite stressful sometimes, which is not the fault of anyone, but this is just the way our interaction was.
Yeah.
And I think the breakup is always hard, but in the end, it again made me realize also in the data that somehow my unhappiness, or that there was a big variation before in how happy I felt from day to day. Yeah. And I became much more stable afterwards because that conflict system was gone basically.
Yeah, and also, I mean, the dependency of your happiness was suddenly probably more focused on you again.
Yeah.
And you were more in control of your, content, happiness. I don't know the right word to choose now. But then obviously you could set up everything as you would want, and there is no other party that would affect this. And ideally it would affect it obviously positive.
Yeah.
But at the end of a relationship, the likelihood, because the end was coming, that it's a little bit negative.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and I think, in general, I also started analyzing more my personality type, and I really realized if I like someone, I want to make sure that they are happy, and I focus sometimes too much on that. So that then if the other person somehow isn't happy with you, then you feel unhappy because they don't, this is a whole thing. And I think
circle on itself,
that's also just a general learning, right? And throughout 2025, I really realized this. I saw this for a while I was tracking still, that my emotional level was much more stable.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think this is also just a general learning. And I could, to a degree, just see this in the data, that there were not these big dips anymore.
So we was much more constrained on the subtle shifts and not more on extreme variation. Yes. Okay. But was it at least stable positive?
Yes. Yeah. I think you're also always calibrating your baseline again. You don't...
I think so.
Yeah.
Although there are people there are these, as you said, there are these personality types of high negative, high positive, low negative, low positive, and all the four combinations. And then there are these kind of attributes to these people. I think the one I called the artists, who have these high negatives and low positives or something. And there are different types. I don't know by heart all of them.
Yeah.
But I think Arthur C. Brooks is one of the people who has a test even online where you can check which of those quadrants you fall in. And
But how valid is it is then the question.
Yeah, he's a professor for that.
Okay.
But then again, if he has a lot of books on it and he has a quiz on it, and then I like his work and his viewpoints, but I think I have not checked his research, and also I don't have the skill set to check really his research because I'm not a psychology major.
There, I would always trust the expert.
Yeah.
And then if you can judge the evidence, that's good. And I also always hope that the expert is willing to change their mind. We talk about this in the beginning, but that's actually quite important. If somebody's not willing to admit that they thought something, but new evidence refutes that, so it's not true anymore, then I don't have a lot of faith.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, no, totally.
And
they should change their mind or opinion.
I recently saw a podcast where there was an interview by a doctor, medical doctor with, I think it was a psychologist basically, or somebody basically specializing in the brain. And the conclusion at the end was, if there's a randomized controlled trial that shows that what this person being interviewed doesn't work, he still won't believe it because there could always be a mistake in the randomized controlled trial.
But then the whole basis for the conversation is gone out of the window. Yeah. If people cannot agree what kind of level of evidence would suffice to change your opinion, because there must be always in all things a level of evidence. If it's presented to you, you would have to change your mind.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you would call it belief. But then it's fine if the people then switch, but they shouldn't then talk out of the psychology expert chair or at researcher credibility, but just say, this is my church. I believe in this. Yeah. And this is a belief, and it's not founded in reality. But if it should be founded in reality, and people have to be founded in reality at some point, because even if you believe something and you fall sick, then you want to have medical care that is evidence-based, because otherwise you die. That's how it works. If you don't agree on the same foundation of how you build and how you create evidence, then there is no discussion to be held. And I think the poor medical doctor wasted his time, or she. Did she? Or
it was Dr. Mike.
We have
he was
talked about him
interviewing
before,
a brain specialist.
Okay.
And he was talking about this.
Was he interviewing Oscar Aman? No.
I don't remember the guy's name, but this for me was like, okay, then I would not trust you.
You also would cancel the podcast. I would say, okay, what are we talking about? Right?
Yeah.
How can we not?
But I think probably as people get older, they're also very entrenched, and they're also invested. Their whole livelihood is invested in this being true. So that's a bit harder. But that actually brings me to how trustworthy are the different scores and things that you get from wearables, like ages. And this is also far from perfect. But I think it's still useful.
Yeah.
and we actually had a quote. I don't know where I put it. Oh yeah, imperfect data can still have value. This is actually from a random space YouTube person that I watch. So he builds rockets, Joe Barnard. It's, I think, BPS Space, I think is the channel. And I think there's a truth to that as well. So for instance, my Whoop age.
Yes.
I know it's totally made up.
Okay,
it's not,
can you quickly expand? So Whoop is the band, right? You wear it on your biceps or wrist, and they have introduced with the last generation a feature they call biological age.
Yes.
Okay, and then you already told in the previous episode that it is a composite of things that they think defines biological age, right?
Yeah.
And this composite is what?
It's,
again,
I think 9 metrics or so.
Okay, and a few of them are
your VO2 max that is estimated, the number of steps you take, your time in heart rate zones 4 to 5, your time in heart rate zones 2 and 3 or 1 to 3. Then weightlifting time, did I already say that?
Yeah.
And then a few more
miles.
things.
Okay, just to get a feeling. Okay.
And
then
things
you get a number, right?
Yes.
And this number updates how often? Is it like something that they say, okay, they aggregate the data and then every week you get an update? Or is it literally if you do very well on all 4 of those because you had a hero day, which I do not recommend to anyone. Be consistent, don't heroic acts. Consistency will always outwork heroic acts. But if you have an extremely heroic weekend where you do everything perfectly and you ran, you worked out, you did your steps and so on, would then suddenly on Monday be an age of 10 less?
No, it's a slow metric that changes.
Good.
I think there's a 30-day thing, but that influences it a little bit, and then otherwise it's even longer term.
And it's a shifting window. So it's
basically
always the past 30 days that
you
define.
You have there's a biological age and there's a pace of aging.
Okay.
And what they want you to do, I think the pace of aging is changing a little bit faster, but they want you to optimize this, which will then reflect back into your biological age. And if your pace of aging is below 1, you're basically getting younger, like relative to your actual. Like
one is the
age.
gradient, the first derivative probably of the other, and hence if you have a hero day, you could actually move the needle a lot faster, but actually until it gets there, the data, the point, the line, it takes the time of
and if
the 30-day
after
window.
I don't even know the term hero day, but if after your hero day, it's normal days again, it won't do so much.
For context, I just took it from, in psychedelics, it's hero dose, that you take a big dose, right? But it's associated with higher risk. And then it's always in the literature also, like when you say that people work out based on motivational bursts or New Year's resolutions and do a lot in a very short time with also here, if sports, increased risk, and then fall off the wagon because they cannot just push through, they cannot sustain this level, or they actually get injured. And then it's even the worst outcome you could imagine, and you again have it not. So consistency beats hero.
Yes, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But coming back to imperfect data still being valuable, there still needs to be some value or some truth to the imperfect data. So I believe, like we're using Whoop now as an example, but Aura has different metrics. If the underlying stuff that you're optimizing is generally good and they don't have you overdo it, then I think there's value in it, even though that actual biological age number is completely made up.
Yeah.
Like
what is it for you right now? Like your chronological age being...
I'm usually between like roughly around 11 to 12 years younger.
Okay.
I don't have my phone here, but it's roughly around that. No. Again, I think this is for all these kinds of ages, it's more a matter of your fitness level being close to that, but that doesn't talk about your cardiovascular calcification or whatever. Maybe you over time are developing some renal disease or something that you don't know about, that even though you're able to run an ultramarathon, that thing is happening. So it's not like your full body is younger because everything is still aging, or maybe you're likely to get early onset Alzheimer's. It's not as if you're you're probably reducing your risk a little bit, but it's not as if when I'm now 10 years or 12 years younger, that I postponed that by 12 years.
Exactly, that you postponed your death, which would be, the age is mostly like used then for lifespan, and it's probably not likely that you just live 10 years suddenly longer because of fulfilling these brackets. But as you said, if the brackets or the composites, the items actually make sense individually, and then they sum up to something that is an aggregate that makes sense and that helps. But we discussed already before that one of the composites item is steps, right?
Yeah.
And you told me before the episode that if you have a low step day but a high activity day nevertheless, so everything that's not running or walking, but could be cycling, could be strength training, could be anything, you would still get penalized by the score if you don't fulfill your quota, basically.
As far as I can see and understand the app, I didn't do a deep dive because as far as I know, I actually didn't think of this before the episode, they don't convert other activity to steps. It's actually
it's the actual steps. Yeah.
I want to look this up. We'll put it in the show notes.
Okay, good.
Otherwise, but yes, I think steps, as far as I can see, is sort of a separate item.
Yes.
So if I do an indoor bike ride, it doesn't add steps, even though that indoor bike ride might be the same energy expenditure and cardio effort as easy run or something.
Exactly.
Which would result in maybe 10,000 steps if it's 10K or so.
Exactly. What is the steps again there for? It's a proxy for general movement. And if you say, hey, I've been cycling indoor for 4 hours because I'm working on my zone 1, zone 2, and I just, I don't know, I listen to an audiobook, like reading, there is no one who had this much movement on average on that day, right? But nevertheless, you might get penalized. And this steps is just this proxy. And they want you to have a specific number, actually?
No, but you basically get, the more you get, I guess to a degree, I don't know, you get basically deductions from your biological age. But I don't know what sort of the slope of this is, if it like tapers off at 20,000 steps to nothing more above that. This, I don't know.
Yeah.
But again, it's just a metric, and devil's advocate, maybe taking a walk or doing the same activity outdoors versus indoors makes a difference, where steps are more likely outdoors than other cardio
then maybe you
activities.
have a treadmill, or you have a treadmill in front of your desk, and then there wouldn't be a difference in terms of, it couldn't differentiate. But it could be, it's always what are the assumptions to a metric and what is it a proxy for, and what is the underlying thinking and guidelines or the rationale behind a certain metric, such that again reflecting no good heartening law that the metric becomes the goal without thinking about the origin of the metric, and then it becomes a bad metric basically if it gets hacked or good heartened.
But still a lot of these underlying things that they put in it make sense. So overall, I think it's a net positive for me to look at this. And I'm using the gamification more than beforehand I thought I would. I thought I would not be sensitive to gamifying, but this particular gamification works for me.
Because the scores in Aura don't do anything for you, right?
No.
That's funny, yes. I mean, I would love that they, and I don't know, maybe they do that. Do they have kind of education cards or info tags where they then reference some literature that, for example, a high VO2 max is clearly connected to decreased mortality? And if you have really, I mean, I think the numbers are insane. We would have to put them I will try to put them in the show notes then. But the numbers are really, really high in terms of if you're an elite level VO2 max, then you have a mortality reduction of a certain fold, which is not seen. Like it's comparable to like what is the worst thing that you could do? Smoking, for example. And then it's even stronger than smoking, right? And this then always for people that the absence of actually an activity is a hazard ratio, a hazard ratio that is worse than smoking. So this would be cool, I think, if they really put everywhere high level, high impact, well researched literature that they say, okay, we selected this metric because in VO2 max, for example, we just know, right? But for steps, I think we mentioned it in a previous episode, but the 10,000 number is to some degree made up. But we have research that high step numbers is a good proxy for health, but actually like tapers out in the meaning of the improvements start to not come in the same level around 6,000 to 8,000 steps per day. That doesn't mean you should force yourself to walk less. You should just not force yourself to walk more, because then you just get less for your time.
And also these 6,000 to 8,000, the study population sometimes is older women or whatever.
Population level and which population, right? But then again, for all these other things, it would be super useful, I think, if then it always reflects, like we selected this because it's one of the biggest determinants that we could have identified, and that's where it's only, I don't know, 9 numbers, but 9 is already a lot. I would have guessed if 5 would suffice for maybe to have a culminative predictive value that is, high enough.
Yeah, I think
how much does each add?
In Whoop, but also Aura, and I think most of these apps most cards relate more to your data in that moment, where they say, hey, your HRV was really high tonight, which resulted in a high readiness score or something like this. So most of the cards focus on these kinds of data insights more than why do we care.
Okay.
You can find it all on the website, but it's less actively being presented to people.
With Aura, I like that they have everywhere this information button, and if you click that, then it always tries to explain it in quite good language, but nevertheless there are no references. It just states it as fact, and you do not get the feeling, or you cannot check if there's a paper or literature underlying it, and then you often have to check in the website, as you say, or in their blog posts that they provide, and there they cite some stuff. But yeah, for me, in the Aura app, we have not biological age, but they introduced something. I think they introduced it this year. They call it cardiovascular age, and they base it on pulse wave velocity estimates based on your nightly pulse wave. So these are very important points. The pulse wave is basically when your heart contracts, then it sends out a pulse wave. This is a physics principle that rushes ahead of the actual blood and gets propagated through your arterial system. And why is this relevant? A stiff arterial system leads to a faster propagation of this pulse wave, hence a higher pulse wave velocity. So maybe to restate it, if I have a stiff system, it's like having a lot of tubes that are made of metal, and I would push in with a certain, like the heart, it contracts, then the velocity is very high. But if I take a rubber pipe and make the rubber very elastic, then if I push it in, this pulse wave would travel slower. And so there is again population level data that certain pulse wave velocities correspond to a certain age, and that's how they determine it. So, and
how do they measure this? Do you know?
Again, from the light sensors. The light sensor gives them a curve basically for each of the pulse, and then they derive it from that. So it's
so
not a direct
the shape
measurement
of the PPG signal. So this light sensor signal is used.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. This is the only thing that is used. If you want to do it more rigorous, you have to take really more measurements, for example, across your arm, or often it's actually taken from your heel because there's a longer system, and so you can measure it more easily. But you would have to go to a doctor's office, a cardiologist, and then you get these measurements, and then they can measure how fast this travels. And it's also interesting that, for example, left and right is then different, but here we just have the hand and then the ring right. But nevertheless, it's, I think, in this, for example, what I just tried to explain, they try also to explain in these information cards to some degree. They don't get into depth why a stiff system is bad and so on, but I think reflecting or actually referring back to the previous podcast, we talked a little bit about blood pressure when we talked about blood pressure wearables and why blood pressure is important or is a high predictor of morbidity and then also mortality for arteriosclerotic and cardiovascular disease. That you don't want to have high blood pressure, and high blood pressure is often a result of a stiffening, or mainly a result of a stiffening arterial system. And this stiffening is also something that we cannot stop right now. So everyone, doesn't matter who they are, what they do, they have a stiffening system over time, but the question is how fast is it stiffening? And that's exactly what they try to measure. So they try to estimate across your last 30 nights, also moving window, the pulse wave velocity. Then they have a number, and then they always give you an update every week because it's a moving window, and then they give you every week an update what's the number and what this corresponds to in chronological age. And then they know your chronological age from the data that you put in, and then they say, okay, you are X years younger. So for example, I think you know the number.
10 years, I think.
Yeah, we checked. You're 10 years younger. And I started to be 6.5 years younger very recently. And that's exactly an illustration maybe of the faults of these systems. So everything I said now is, I think, established by science. The pulse wave velocity, the arterial stiffening is bad, it's a proxy, and it's also a proxy of blood pressure and so on. But for the whole year, until the beginning of December, I was 4 years younger. With I looked it up, 6.4 meters per second was my pulse wave velocity. And then I entered your sleep study. Your running study.
Sleep study is already done.
Yes, already done. That's true. The running study, where I have to go for a run 3 times a week at least, and I'm sticking to the minimum for at least 30 minutes per run, and I'm sticking to the minimum. But although it's only 3 runs and it's only 30 minutes per run, like 3 runs per week, within the 4 weeks of December, my cardiovascular age, defined by pulse wave velocity, dropped by 2.5 years. So do we believe that my cardiovascular system was getting younger by 2.5 years within the course of 4 weeks?
No.
So 1/12 of a year.
But does that mean, like, why would their measurement of your pulse wave velocity go down so much?
Yeah.
Because how you just explained it,
Yeah.
it meant that there's only basically a like a worsening of your pulse wave velocity as you age.
As you age, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So how did you get better, and do we know what would be the actual mechanisms why you could at least partially improve your pulse wave velocity?
So cardiovascular exercise does improve it. So
but do we know the mechanism underneath? Like why? What happens to those cells in your arterial wall that they become more flexible?
Yeah. So I think I have to introduce to some degree arterial biology and physiology as far as I know it. Please bear with me, and also put in the comments if I say something wrong. But basically, these are tubes, and we're only talking about only the arterial system and not the venous system. So only the system that has this pressurized, nutrient-dense, oxygen-rich blood to dissipate throughout your body to get it to basically every cell, because your cells need nutrients. And then the venous system is only the nutrient poor and the oxygen poor, and maybe even the little bit toxic stuff that is the waste products basically that get back through the system and through your heart again, and then gets oxygenized by the lungs. So only arterial system. And the difference here is that the arteries, they are very differently structured, and their inner layer is an endothelial cells, and then there is some structural cells more, and then outside, and that's the important part, there are muscles. There's a thick muscle layer, and this is actually the main functional component of this elasticity and release of pressure. It's a slow release of pressure. So when the heart contracts, it's a discrete thing that happens. A lot of pressure is pushed into your aorta, so the thick, biggest artery leaving your heart on the left ventricle. And that means suddenly there's a lot of expanse in your aorta, and the better and more flexible and the better the muscle lining is, the more it can expand. And what's the word? It basically not inhales, but it takes up all the pressure and then releases it in a more slow manner, because what your whole system wants is actually continuous supply of nutrients and oxygen. You do not want to have it this way, right? You want to have it continuously provided, but your heart is a mechanical device to some degree that is discrete. So it pumps by an electrical impulse once every second. If we're sitting down, now we're talking probably a little bit more, 1.5 times every second. I guess it's a heart rate of 90 now. And for this to compensate, also to remove the pressure and convert it from a discrete event into a continuous giving off the pressure, you need this muscle layer. And I think coming back to your question, what changes? What is the adaptive thing? If you have cardiovascular training, you have a lot higher heart rate with a lot more stimulus or insult to some degree to this whole system, but it's an insult only to the degree that it's still hormetic, and that means that your body can adapt to it. So it's a stimulus that you provide to your body, and if you give it enough time to recover, it actually adapts to it. And this adaptation is then really this improvement in flexibility and the strength of these muscles. And at the same time, it improves, and we discussed this briefly about cardiovascular disease before, the endothelial layer as well. So the endothelial dysfunction is also a hallmark of cardiovascular disease, and you improve by stimulating it through exercise, also that it adapts, and this adaptation is then the improvement.
So the same way when you're training and you want to grow a muscle,
yes,
that's also a good hormetic adaptation.
Exactly. It's a stimulus, but the classic thing is overtraining.
Yeah.
That would be too many stimuli or too strong stimuli, either or it can be even both, too many, too strong, that you do not recover fully, and then you go into overtraining, and then you over time get less and less performance because the system cannot recover and adapt to the degree it requires.
Yes. So getting back to your question,
yes,
did you actually become 2.5 years younger?
Yeah.
Well, maybe your endothelial cells and muscle cells did adapt in a way that makes you more like people 2.5 years younger than you, but only that specific system adapted.
Yeah.
And it's not like your heart is now that much stronger, or maybe your brain aging, like there was some regeneration of specific regions of your brain. It's very specific to the one thing you measured.
Exactly. Exactly. And I think there's really this differentiation. It's not even the full cardiovascular system. So just this one aspect probably improved. Here, I was still surprised about the speed of change. I mean, 4 weeks is somehow nothing in my book, that there should be a visible change. And then it claims to have 2.5 years. But then again, we have to reflect. Actually, from 6.4 meters per second, I reduced the speed to 6.2 meters per second. But apparently, if it then looks up in the table what it corresponds to for my gender and age, then it can do the subtraction. And then it basically says, okay, this would correspond to someone, a male that is, I don't know, of this weight, but I don't think it matters. Of someone who is 6.5 years younger than 4 years.
And do you know if they compare it to a table from literature or from their own data internally?
I don't know. I don't know. This is also interesting. Yeah, would be
because Aura users are not a random subset of society.
Absolutely not. Yes. Also, the Whoop users, as you said, with the percentiles, it's also already not. It's an interesting comparison group, but it's not the same as if you ask about population level. But then again, do you want to compare in some respects to people that are more similar to you in terms of health conscious and so on? Or do you want to be better than the average who has, maybe it's a global average even, and then it's very different.
Yeah, in general, probably comparing yourself to somebody living now versus 20 years ago versus 40 years ago versus 500 years ago, you get very different results.
Okay, good
Because
point.
probably there was an most of the improvement in our lifespan was because we could deal with chronic diseases better. Also, to a degree, traumatic injury and stuff is better treated now.
Yeah, I think infectious diseases was a big bump. And then chronic diseases was the bump in the last 50 years, basically. But yeah definitely.
But also, it can be infectious diseases. It can be, if you now get a heart attack, probably you will survive with medical treatment. And then maybe you develop other diseases like Alzheimer's or so that you wouldn't have developed because you would have died of a heart attack before. So it's very, like, if I compare you also to the American population versus the Dutch or the Finnish, or like, you will get very different results.
Exactly. So choosing the comparison and how I always frame it is how to slice the cake, the data cake, makes a lot of difference, which we also know from our work, right? It depends always what you compare to, how you select your comparison group, and many studies, not ours obviously, are flawed because people have not checked that the control group themselves were actually quite weird.
Yeah.
And this changes everything, because a control group, just for the listener, is your ground truth, your baseline you want to compare to when you introduce an intervention or a perturbation to a system. But if for some reason, and that might be really freakish incidents, your control group is very different than expected. So I think there were studies with mouse weights and lifespans, and then you had these effects that a supplement or a molecule, let's just call it molecule, was extending lifespan a lot. But then when they actually looked at the control group of the mice lived significantly, the control mice fewer years, like shorter lives than would be expected from a normal mouse of this breed and so on. And then it's okay, what happened there? And suddenly you have this effect, although the effect might not be as large or even statistically significant if your control group was different. So how you compare is very important.
Actually, talking about our studies, I did a fun study a while ago. So it's a bit of a tangent, but it again shows that control groups and choosing your reference is important. So we wanted to know how cold affects your immune system, because we'd seen in some studies that in winter, to some degree, our immune system responds less strong to the flu. So we wanted to see, does a single cold insult, so a single cold exposure, actually decrease your immune response to a virus? So what we did...
I hope not.
I also hope not. So we actually went, there's also partially a science communication. So we actually went to a festival. We got permission to do experiments there. And then people could volunteer to give a little bit of blood. We would test how their white blood cells basically responded to viral particles. And then they would go in a cold bath for, I think, only 5 minutes or so, 6 minutes. And then we would give them half an hour to recuperate. And then we would take blood again and see how was the response. And indeed, we saw a less strong immune response. But luckily, the ethical committee had demanded that we include a control group that would just get their blood drawn, then do the same protocol, except for going in the bath. So they would also
fill outside
out, they basically wait, then we take another sample. And they also showed that decrease. So probably they came from the outside, were very active, and maybe just the not being active for a while already did something and it wasn't a huge effect, but it was statistically at least significant. But the control group had the same, so then it was
so it was not the intervention that you introduced. I mean,
even though we used people as their own control, that wasn't enough, because even the non-intervention in the end was an intervention.
The common denominator was not the cold plunge, but actually the partaking in the study.
Yes.
And that's a hidden variable, right? And you would not think of it. But it's a very good ethical committee that actually forced you to do this. I guess they forced you, because it's usually additional work. And you're like, why do we need it?
We didn't want to be underpowered. So we're because the control group was in the end only 20% of the total testing that we did. But we're like, we're going to lose 25% of our test subjects. Maybe we lose power. But choosing your reference is important. And I think also maybe in the end for these kind of things, in the long run, you should be your own reference. Your past self should be, that's in the end what you're trying to change, improve, work on.
That's a system you're basically looking at. And that again is a point of starting early and just having a lot of automation in place that takes care of the tracking and that is somewhere and then it's saved. And yes, in a cloud, maybe in an American cloud, like US American cloud, but also wherever, it doesn't matter. Just that you have a baseline of when your peak or when your optimal health or you felt your fittest was, just to have something to compare to. But to another point that you made in the previous episode is to have two wearables that you wear very often, for example, your Whoop and your Oura Ring. And then you always, if someone shouts wolf, right, cries wolf, then you actually check if the other one is
with
also...
someone being one of the wearables.
Exactly, yeah. Or if Whoop tells you that something is off, but Oura is not, or the other way around, you're not as confident in taking action as if both of them are aligned. I have actually Withings Smart Scale. I think you have exactly the same.
Yes.
And there they also measure pulse wave velocity by different means. So they don't have a light sensor. So this is already good, I think, if your two different measurements are two different sensors. Like I also emphasized before that I like that the 8 sleep is a very different measurement modality than the light-based modalities. And they also measure pulse wave velocity, different modalities, so it has a different measuring mechanism. And also in
so what is the modality?
I think electrical current.
Some kind of something G.
Exactly. So
ECG.
What you basically do is you stand on the scale and you have a handle, and the handle is also connected to the scale, and the handle has electrodes basically, and the scale also is consisting of electrodes, and then they send different frequencies and signals throughout to determine your body composition, your pulse wave velocity, and then also a third one that I will quickly touch upon is nerve health. But let's stick with the pulse wave velocity for a second. The interesting difference is also that Oura measures it always at night, at rest, which I think is smart and interesting, because I think this estimation of the pulse wave velocity is quite sensitive, as far as I know even. And in the smart scale scenario, I'm standing on a scale, right? And I'm awake and I've booted up to some degree and I have very different pressures working. And I always have a lot higher value in like a significantly higher value in the smart scale. And even they also have an internal table. I, again, don't know what they reference me to, but there I'm always far older than my chronological age. And there I also reduced my age by 2 years, interestingly. But here I was 38 years for the whole year, basically, roughly. I mean, it was up and downs, but roughly with 7.3 meters per second. And then now after 4 weeks of running, starting from December, I am now at 36 years with 6.9 meters per second. So I think, as you said, with having two different systems, two different algorithms probably, and so on, having still the same conclusion that my something in my cardiovascular system got younger might be true. And I also think because I was a more adamant runner before, I might have tapped into old capabilities, similar to if you have been a strength athlete, to some degree your muscle cells remember that you have been doing that before. For example, if when you were young, 10 years, then you take a break, you have a much easier time to regain your previous form or close to your previous form than someone who has never done it and starts in their 30s.
But do they know if it's in the actual muscles or if it's neurological?
Good point. I know of one mechanism. So muscle cells are multinucleated, and one mechanism, and muscle training is hypertrophy, not
multinucleated
hyperplasia.
Means there are several cell cores, basically.
Yes. Nuclei, exactly. Thank you. Exactly, which is in normal cells not the case, or in most cells not the case. They have only one core, and this is one of the adaptations that happens during strength training. That actually they get larger, so it's hypertrophy training. Muscle size increase comes from the increase of individual cells, and this is a byproduct of that. It's not the increase of the numbers of muscle cells per se, or in this cell.
So I think you said increase of number of cells, but increase of number of nuclei, or
no, it's not again, hypertrophy is increase of size, not numbers. Yes. That would be hyperplasia, and size increase to some degree tracks with, in this case, with the number of nuclei that get increased. Exactly. Now you said something that I didn't think of, the neurological component, and a lot of people don't realize that strength is to a high degree, as soon as you are to some degree strength training adapted, neurologic and not literally the muscle cells. And what I mean with that is that basically the wire going from your brain to your muscles gets improved, and also the response from your muscles to a signal gets also much more sensitized if you do strength training now compared to hypertrophy training only. So not only for size, but really to get stronger. And this adaptation, I think, is slower and might also be retained. Yes, but I don't know how fast it falls off a cliff, because strength seems something that people lose faster than muscle mass. But then I don't know. This does not speak for if you cannot regain it to a certain same degree. That is not informative, right? We don't know. Yeah.
So you now talked a lot of data that you get.
Yeah.
So how do you in the end use this data for yourself, and how do you use it to plan for your next year?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still part of your running study, right? So I will definitely see if this keeps improving. And I have to say I'm really intrigued, because to some degree we have very cold temperatures right now, and I'm really fighting with myself when there is we have temperatures around 0 degrees, which is freezing. But actually, if you flip it to not what the actual temperature is, but what it feels like right now, we have -6 to -10. And this is
in Celsius. That means so many degrees below freezing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Freezing point in Celsius is 0.
So that's 0
for the American people.
Yes, and this is very cold. I mean, for me at least, and also very uncomfortable. And the logistics are just annoying that you have to put on so many clothes and you sweat through them.
I turned on the heater for you today.
Really, I don't feel it, but I'm very grateful for the slippers. I can feel my toes again. But yeah, I'm fighting with myself. But as soon as it will get warmer, this excuse will also disappear. That I might force myself to increase my one run per week to maybe 2 or 3, because I mean, this is quite striking in terms of change. And I don't think I changed anything else that would affect this metric. I have seen in the past, but this is now super anecdotal and hand wavy, so take this with a spoonful of salt. Watch your blood pressure. That if I have a very bad diet for a prolonged period, that also this number gets worse. Which makes sense to some degree. High saturated fat tracks with LDL cholesterol, which is the determinant of cardiovascular disease because it gets embedded in the endothelial cells in your arteries, which I said before, they then get dysfunctional and so on. Nevertheless, this period in December, at least for Austrians, is also not very healthy.
Yeah, and probably your diet is correlated with so many other things.
Exactly, yeah.
It's hard to say.
But the running seems to be really something that I should reintroduce or reinforce stronger into my
it's actually
regimen.
interesting that this single metric changed so much.
Yeah.
Because what we're actually studying is VO2 max instead of this particular metric. There, I should say, the one downside of doing it in winter is also the more gear you put on, the harder it is to run, and the app only knows your sort of body weight.
Yeah.
So we actually, in an ideal world, we would want you to use wearables when you're wearing as little as possible.
Yeah.
Or
you mean because of weight and obstruction?
Exactly, because the wearable basically uses your weight, how fast, the pace at which you're going, your heart rate during that pace, and all those kind of things as a way to calculate or estimate your VO2 max. And if you were, for instance, to put on a weight vest, then the calculation would be totally off.
Yeah.
And to a degree, probably in winter, you're wearing a kilogram extra or 2 pounds extra of weight. I don't know what it is exactly. Yeah. So that will slightly negatively affect the study. So in the study, we're trying to find out which wearable is best at estimating your VO2 max without actually having to go to a VO2 max lab.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I'm like, this is how people use their device.
Yeah.
So tough if that affects it a lot.
Now, I might. I'm pretty sure that the cold makes you able to perform higher. And I think for VO2 max, that's quite important. Because if you would do a VO2 max test in 35 degrees Celsius, which is very hot, or at now
it's probably 100 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm just guesstimating here.
Okay, yeah, and then we suddenly have temperatures from the sun.
Probably for 100 degrees is more 40, but 40 Celsius. I don't know. This is like
but
my
something
rough
extremely
estimation.
hot where you would sweat by not being active outside, let's put it like that, and something where you are actually quite chilly outside, so 10 degrees Celsius in your running clothes. I think if you would do a real VO2 max test where you have to go all out to the absolute limit in a cold temperature would be conducive to that. And you could go much harder, and that's why even there is, I would not recommend buying it. That's again for this top % of performance that you might want to increase, but there is this movement of having in the gym gloves that cool you down to a high degree by cooling down your hands and arms, and thereby your whole system, because we have a circulatory system and you cool it down extremely, and that gives you more power in the gym, in the strength compartment. And to some degree, at the very end of this VO2 max test, it's very much about how much strength can you still put out, right? In terms of running, it's like really sprinting for you, and then until you break, or cycling, but I break early.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I didn't think about that. So there's also some benefits there.
Exactly, it could be.
But I think some of the manufacturers recommended not to do it in too cold temperatures, but I have to look up again.
Could then again be more of that, because this I see that the circulation might be affected to the degree that actually my O-ring is completely off suddenly in terms of running.
We have people who wear a chest strap for almost any device. So
totally.
Still, that can also feel in very cold temperatures, but I think not the temperatures
but
we're
I think
dealing with.
Watches will be off to some degree. Yes.
So for some wearables in the study, you cannot connect a chest strap. So there it is what it is.
But
okay,
is good.
We're diverging a little bit. So
there may be another metric that I also tracked, but I will not take action on. And I found really interesting to see also with this Withings app, like the smart scale is this nerve health. There they have a score from 0 to 100, and they have a relationship between the score and your age where it should be. But basically my finding was when I did a lot of hiking, which I did this year for training for a long tour around the Mont Blanc Massif, and also then the tour itself, wearing these shoes and also having this high impact on your foot, on your sole, basically reduced my nerve health to a really high degree. Like on the 0 to 1 scale, it dropped down by 15 points or so, and I'm still recuperating from that. Now I'm wearing a lot of barefoot shoes, and I like to be barefoot in general. And I also do a lot of barefoot work to hopefully reactivate this. But this was interesting to me. And it was maybe 6 weekends as preparation, 1 5-day trip, and then the 11-day trip itself, right? That's not so much. You would not expect that you lose 15% of your whatever it is quantified nerve health.
Yeah.
But this is nothing I want to address because I want to keep hiking, and I find it just interesting to see. So there are also these observations that correlate highly with activities where I will not take action, but it's something I can have a look out for.
Yeah, I guess, again, we will also come to our quote or motto at the end.
Yeah.
But in general, I would say you optimize a lot, but as long as it's not too invasive for your life. Like we have to balance, like what do we want to do with our lives? What are we trying to achieve? We also want to somehow get some kind of, not necessarily happiness, but some kind of contentment from our lives, and hopefully also improve the lives of others and society to some degree.
And in that vein, to improve society as well, I mean, we do it because it's fun for us. I love talking to Rob. Rob seems to enjoy talking to me. But if you enjoy our content, please subscribe to YouTube, the channel that helps us the most, and listen on all the other platforms. We try to put the podcast in every platform that we could find. And I think it's especially important for these platforms if there are reviews. So listening to it already helps. That's great. But if you have 1 or 5 more minutes, I think it's very quick. Just leave a review. Let us know how we are doing. But
so reviews are mostly on other platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, because we're, I guess, best known on YouTube at the moment. Like we're just starting out. But it would be really helpful to get a few reviews on those platforms just to get the word out.
And also that, if you benefit from it, thereby you can actually help make other people benefit from it. Or if it's just entertaining to you and you want to make someone happy, then it's also fine. And obviously, we always welcome any feedback in the comments and what we can improve. This is really the best way to support this podcast now.
Yeah, comments are really interesting. We've seen a few super interesting ones already.
That's true. But maybe we do in a later episode somehow.
To address some of the good and things we agree with and things we don't agree with, and why we do or do not agree with them. Not in a negative way, but more there's evidence for different things and also sort of reasoning for different things that we do.
But now looking forward.
Yes.
So we were very much focused on the past, and to some degree we already foreshadowed that this could inform your next steps. And these next steps very often are New Year's resolutions. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you're familiar with the term, but there is this Quitters Day. It's the second Friday in January, I think. Mm-hmm. It's the official definition, but please check me on that, but something like that. And it's called the Quitters Day because apparently more than X%, I don't know where people get these numbers, but X% of people have quit at that day latest their New Year's resolutions already. And it's only the second Friday in January. And I don't know, do you do New Year's resolutions regularly?
Not really. No, it's not been something that really resonates with me. But I know it's worked for some people. But for me, I more have some goals in a year, but they happen to fall in that year. And that's why I'm generally content with my level of workout, my level of these kinds of things. My nutrition could be a little bit better, but I already started to work on that at the end of last year.
Yeah.
But I know it's a good way for a lot of people, and maybe only 10% in the end sticks with it long term, but still
that would be a lot. Yes,
good.
That's true. And also, I mean, I don't want to I have to use nice words, otherwise I'm bleeped again. I don't want to be negative about even those 2 weeks, right? If you do something for yourself for 2 weeks and then fall off the wagon, at least you got 2 weeks, right? So I don't want to be negative, but
what about you? Do you have New Year's resolution?
No, I do not. I also do not. And for the last, I think, 5 or 6 years, I've been doing something that is at least formalized. It was by Tim Ferriss and propagated, and he always propagates it at the end of the year and the beginning of New Year's, which is called past year reviews. And how this works is, these instructions are on his website, and also I have a copy of the instructions extended by my extensions on my website, so we will link that in the show notes. But the idea is that instead of coming up with New Year's resolutions that are just not evidence or data-driven, just ideas and wishes formulated in this way that is often not systemized but very goal-driven, you do a past year review. What that means, you walk through your calendar in a very fast fashion of your last year. I do it really in a flip on Google Calendar to list mode, and I go up to 1st of January, and then I just start scrolling and very skimmingly reading. And as soon as you read something that elicited a peak positive response or peak negative response, you take note. So you have maybe a notebook, or like a literal notebook open, or you have a notepad page or a Notion page open. You just collect in a bullet point fashion peak positives, peak negatives. And I added 2 other categories, which I call learnings, because I think a lot of potentially putative negative things actually encapsulating a lot of learnings. And another category is achievements, because I think it's good to have to some degree a register of it, what you feel like was an achievement, such that you can go back to it when things are not as great. And you basically do that, identify these peak positive, peak negative learnings and achievements, and then you do a little bit of clustering. What I mean with that, you group it by similar things. And the final step, probably the most important step, is that you take some of these things or what they represent and plan for them in the next year. So the positive ones, obviously. I forgot to say the positive ones. And for the peak negative ones, you reformulate them into a not to-do list. A not to-do list. Things you basically actively try to remove or avoid from your life because they are consistently correlating with peak negative experiences. Thereby you have a look back, the data, and you try to improve your next year with this kind of strategy.
And how do you enforce this for yourself? Like, how do you make sure that it works?
It works. Mm-hmm. This is a super good point. Let's start with the easier one for me is the not to-do list. I keep my past year review for the 1st January as a tab open in my browser. And that's also where I work. So I'm always having an open browser. That's really where it's present, and that I check it regularly such that it really gets ingrained. For the positive ones, Tim Ferriss is recommending that it's often something that you can pre-book. So for him, it's often trips with friends, vacations, family time or so. And then he pre-books them. And his idea is put them in the calendar before basically life outcrowds it, and make it a priority by prepaying as well, such that there is a financial pain associated with churning or with canceling. What I do is I discuss with my partner, Steffi, my past year review, and she does the same, also she does. And then we try to find already a few things that we want to put into the calendar also for a fixed, but we don't book it yet because I'm not so early in planning things, and I don't want to decide. So rich. Exactly, and not even close as rich as him. Exactly. But that's how I go about this.
That makes sense. Yeah, I think since I don't really do it to this degree, for me it's more, I think I'm not as established as you in doing this, so I don't want to recommend how I do it, but I do somehow think a bit about things in the back of my mind, and then I have a few goals that I want to work on.
What's up in 2026 for Rob?
So for me, I want to run a marathon.
Okay.
I'm not sure yet if it's going to be an official one or an unofficial one.
What do you mean by unofficial?
So official would be you register for an event and then you go to that event and then you run the marathon. And unofficial would be I just go run until I'm at the, 42 point whatever kilometers it is. And then I'm done.
Yeah.
And I like both. I think I've never needed these kinds of events. People always say, oh, they're so motivating. And maybe they will be. But I don't really need it. Like today before this podcast, I just felt good. So I ran a half marathon. I was like, okay, nice.
So what do you do before a podcast? Just run a half marathon.
I mean, it's like a lot of people that train for a marathon run probably a few half marathons as a training. So it's like...
But not as many as you would think, I think.
Yeah, this I don't know. For me, the most important thing is not to get injured, which is always hard for me.
Yes. Rule number 1 of my activity framework is do not get injured.
Because I had a little bit of an irritation already for a while, and I still felt it today, but I also don't want to stop, because you're always going to feel something over time. So it's a bit of a balance that I'm still learning even at 37 now. So that marathon is one. Let's see if it's going to be official or unofficial. And I like doing that with a plan. So in this case, I use the Runner app, but you can also use other apps. And if there's a plan, it's more likely that I do it. And I started with having these kinds of plans that are generated for me somewhere in, I think it must have been early last year. And that just works much better for me, because indoor cycling, I do a lot and I don't need motivation for that. I just do that in the morning. But if there's like something in my calendar, it's much easier to stick to include also running now in it. So that I will do. So having that plan makes sense.
But that's good. Also, you also pre-plan it. Yeah.
Yes.
You have to, you put it in by an app, in a system, in a way that it cannot be outcrowded by life, in a sense.
And then I still want to be good enough at biking to beat Adam. So that's my, so that depends a bit on another person as well. So Adam is a colleague and he's a quite avid cyclist. So one year he was able to beat me. Last year I was able to beat him. Okay. So now let's see. So you just go over a few of the mountains / hills around Vienna.
Okay.
And there you have to be fastest up it. But that also.
Okay. I just wanted to know how to beat.
No, the down, I'm not going to race.
But it's not like 4 hills and we see each other at the end of the 4 hills.
No, it's each hill independently.
Okay.
Yeah. And this is totally random, but it's fun, works for me, and I'm totally fine with being beaten as well. But it's fun if I can beat him.
In a sense, on a very high level, as far as I can judge that.
I mean, depends on your reference group.
Yes.
We're not professionals by any means, but we're more fit than the average person.
Definitely.
And then also to keep track of my health, I want to also do a few more VO2 max tests, like proper tests throughout the year. And I have this device at home. I just never get around to using it. I used it when I got it for maybe every 6 weeks or so for like 10 times. And then at some point I stopped and just didn't do it again. And I would like to see what I can learn if I do it consistently, both to see how big the variation from like month to month or 6 weeks to 6 weeks is. But it's also kind of invasive, so I don't want to do it too much. But since I have the device, I actually want to do it more.
And you always have to go through a specific protocol, right? I guess
it's this step-based protocol.
What you don't. That's what you probably don't want to do.
Also putting on the mask is quite like it's not.
Is it cumbersome?
It's a mask, but you have to calibrate it, connect it, and then you put it on. But it's the room temperature needs to be above 15 degrees, which in winter is hard here. And the device needs to be warm enough then as well.
Okay.
So in winter, that's something I have to heat up the room beforehand and make sure that the device is open and warm enough. Like this will not be a problem for most people, but just because I don't heat so much, that's a bit of an issue. But I want to do that more. And the final thing that's going to be the hardest, I think, is to make life a bit more balanced. Whereas now work, YouTube, podcast, that takes up so much of my time at the moment. I guess. And this is something I don't know how yet to do it, but like there's always the opportunity to quit one of those things, right?
That's true. Okay.
And there's also things I'm thinking about there, how to best balance things. But I also realized like the moment I'm spending a lot of time with my family, I'm super happy to do, like I'm super happy there. But I also then enjoy the moment that we're all doing our own thing to actually work on something that is productive, whatever that means.
Yeah,
this just makes me happy and actually relaxes me to a degree as well.
Yeah, me too.
So there I also just had to accept that maybe for me doing a lot of sports and also working to whatever you call work a little bit more than other people is actually also relaxation.
Yeah.
Though I still, now that I'm also not in a relationship anymore, I do tend to overdo it a little bit because it's so easy to just take every free moment.
Yes, exactly.
And work on those things.
And it gets outcrowded. Like there's a way if the vacuum fills itself, and that's a little bit of a problem, right?
Yeah, and I want to make sure I don't need to be in a relationship to balance it. And that's like kind of a thing that I still need to work on. Although in general, I had a very happy year, I would say, or a very content year, especially the last half, let's say.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Good job.
Yeah. But I'm not...
something
I think I have these things now in my mind, and I know, for instance, the marathon, as long as that plan is there, I will manage as long as I don't get injured. So
will
it
be
might
taken
happen.
care of itself because it's a system, right?
And staying fit to beat Adam, I'm biking a lot anyway, but they're sort of in the back of my mind. That helps a little bit.
Yeah.
But these other things like doing the VO2 max and making life more balanced, those will be the struggle.
Yeah, that's hard. I mean, the VO2 max thing is something that you could systemize to some degree very easily, where you say, okay, the end of the month cycle session is always, I don't know, or the first of the month. And then you have to do it on the first of the month every time. And you get into a routine where you do it monthly. The other part is one of life's most strongest or highest challenges to some degree, right? So that's definitely not the easiest to systemize. Just when thinking about it, I'm just thinking, okay, I think it's always important to not run away of something, but running towards something and removing something without filling the void that like you don't want to void, right? You want to have something that is potentially more meaningful than what you replace it with. But I think that there you need a towards basically something, and that's difficult. That's hard.
And I know there are certain activities I enjoy and I do too little of, like reading, or like even playing video games. Okay. I sometimes should do a little bit more just because I really do enjoy it, but it feels bad. And I think this feeling bad, I should reduce a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah, this is probably the relationship to the activity must be addressed, and in a mindset fashion that the recovery or the having fun is actually conducive to all downstream or related tasks as well. That's very true. Yes.
But what about you?
I mean, I can basically take parts directly from my past year review that I'm willing to share. Yes, I already did it. And something that emerged at the end of last year is something where you were involved, actually. The podcast, the Fit for Science podcast. That's not the other thing. As I said, what I want to share publicly, the Fit for Science podcast is... it gave me a lot of energy. It was really like the end of the year was even brighter, although it was outside darker for me. And I was always looking forward to the preparations and to meeting up. And I mean, I'm so grateful because I'm riding along with the quantified scientist here, who is a super established name on YouTube. And I mean, you guys don't see it, but I'm sitting in a quite professional setup that is really high tech. And I hope you appreciate that the video and audio quality is also on a different level than most things that you see on YouTube. I like it, and I'm really looking forward where this goes. I have no idea, but I'm having fun. I think we said as long as we're having fun, we will do it. Yeah. And currently this is a blast. In terms of not to-do list, it's the second category. I decided that I want to do also less. But I have identified that 3 things are really currently a distraction from my main objective. And the distractions are that talks, trainings, and meetups. So in our job as researchers, part of our job is simply to stay up to date and to visit a lot of talks of other researchers. But this is extremely time intensive. You have to get there. You have to basically context shift. You listen for an hour, you discuss ideally with your colleagues and the speaker themselves afterwards, and then you have to get to your desk again and you context shift again, right? So this is definitely not for free in terms of willpower, cognitive involvement, and also literally time. And this can add up a lot of hours in a month, in a week. And I think right now in my academic journey, I'm more in a closing the loops kind of mindset, and I should focus really on just definitely not starting anything, but also reducing all these auxiliary tasks that are important to our career and also our work. If scientists stop talking to each other and stop going to talks, that would be horrible. But I think there are different phases for example, in my case, a PhD, and I will be in this year in a phase where I definitely should cut back on those. And it's on
probably also true for other jobs, for other people.
It could be,
the details are not the same.
Yes, but there are phases.
Yes, exactly. And also that you have to make decisions for that phase, what you are going to do and are not going to do.
Exactly. And I want to definitely focus more on reduce and close loops and stop doing these things as auxiliary tasks. Although that overall might reduce a bit my staying in the field and staying up to date, but nevertheless, the most important thing is to finish projects and move on with some of the things that we are interested in. Yeah, and the key learning that I want to share, I wanted to take it away from work and the other stuff. So I chose something that is a little bit orthogonal to it, so very different, is that this year really confirmed to me that one bag travel is feasible and works in any scenario. And what I mean with that is that you travel basically only with one backpack, but I don't mean it in a backpacker style, like where you have a, 40-liter backpack, but really something small. Mine is, if expanded, 28 liters, but it's also my day pack, and you can really use it. And I did 3 different vacations where I used it. I used it on a relaxing beach holiday. That is most obvious that this works, because on a beach holiday you don't need a lot of stuff. I did a conference travel with afterwards a trip around the USA East Coast, completely fine with this small backpack. And we did a hiking trip that I've referred to now a few times. Also, obviously this is only one backpack because you have to hike with it, and it should be as small and light as possible. But nevertheless, you need to bring stuff for emergencies, and you have to.
And you didn't have a tent or something?
No tent. Always sleeping in huts. Yeah, definitely. No tent, exactly. And in all of 3 cases, never anything critical was missing, and it just is such an improvement in your quality of travel to have only a very small backpack. You like during flights, when you commute, when you pack up again, when you do a road trip or whatever. It's amazing to have as little luggage and baggage in both meanings of the word with you as possible. Yeah, and that's my past year review. 3 points that I should
say, as a background here, Stephan is obsessed with backpacks.
Yeah, I have a problem.
And he buys a new one. Like he's very conscious that to not own too much stuff.
Yes.
Except for backpacks, those change every 9 months. There's like a new exciting backpack.
That's really a problem, guys.
It's interesting to see how everybody has their own weird obsessions that most people don't care about and understand. And you're like, but this backpack has this extra functionality.
And then Rob is always teasing me like, but Stephan, you have a perfectly good backpack. Is this really a better backpack? And I'm like, no, but I want it.
Even though I'm the guy who owns way too much stuff in general. I have a different backpacks, but I just have different sizes that I use for different things, basically.
I mean, I try to get rid of them, like in terms of I donate them, I sell them. So I have, at the moment, maybe 2 too many.
Yeah.
So, but I don't have more than 5 backpacks right now. I just try to get them out because I'm really obsessed with this, getting the one thing that you can use for everything. I love it. I love this idea. It's kind of a, I don't know even what's the right philosopher, Aristoteles or Socrates, I don't know, where you have this the idea of a horse, and then every horse is an instantiation of the horse, or the idea of a sphere, and then everything that's circular is an instantiation of the sphere. I don't know which one of the Greeks was that, but I have this as well. I want the one jacket that I can wear all year, and that is everything water windproof, and I want the one backpack that can do everything. Obviously that doesn't exist, but you can dream.
And then talking about dreaming, what would be the things that wearables or apps should or would hopefully include in 2026 to make your tracking life easier, better, more complete?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that. So what I really would like is GPS in these non-screen devices. If they are really good already in auto detection of activities. And if they then auto detect that you're outdoor and you're walking, hiking, or whatever, that they by themselves could stand alone track the GPS with sufficient accuracy, obviously, and then have all the data and are not reliant on a companion phone, for example, which is the case for Whoop and Aura right now.
Yeah, and also Polar Loop. That's actually not... I had somewhere in front of me here, but it's not the best at the auto detection game.
Okay.
That still needs some improvement. There you can set the sensitivity, but I have like not the most sensitive, but the second most sensitive level.
Yeah.
And still it misses a lot of my workouts. I think it's purely heart rate based.
Mm-hmm.
And there it sometimes struggles a bit, especially because I do a lot of intervals. Either they get split up or just the whole part is missing. I mean, this is the first generation, so it will definitely get better. Yeah. Like Aura and Whoop just have a lot more development time. And in terms of heart rate, new video coming soon. It was actually quite a lot better
teaser
than in my initial testing, especially when worn on the bicep. So here, I don't have it on, but if you wear it here, it's similar to these two.
Yeah.
It actually does quite a lot better than I expected. So not to be super negative about the Polar Loop, because I think not having a subscription model has its benefits for a lot of people.
And auto detection is also a software problem mostly.
Exactly, something they can still solve. And if they have GPS, they could actually do it better.
Yeah.
Indoor workouts are kind of hard. There, you purely need heart rate probably and movement.
But even there, I would appreciate if there is a metadata tag of the location. Suddenly then, I mean, for everything that it tracks, that it knows automatically it was not at home. And even for sleep, it would be great if then automatically detects, it's not close to your home base that you can define in your settings, but actually you were sleeping in a different country, in the same country, in a different altitude would be also interesting. Like all these things that are derivatives of your location could be interesting, right? And then again, it's probably a battery issue. Right?
Yes, battery. And I don't know how big GPS modules are actually. Like I have no idea about the sizing of these components. But it's battery and just another thing that they have to get right.
Yeah.
And I think their thinking is, especially for a ring, it's hard. But for this kind of like wearable that doesn't have a screen that's a bit bigger, that's on your wrist or on your biceps, there should be more possible. But again, battery life, and it needs to work well, which is not the easiest thing. And also when to turn it on and off, because most of these devices, watches, just turn on when you're doing your sport because you turn it on.
Yep. Exactly.
I mean, they could still use another way of automatic activity detection to then turn it on, but that doesn't give you the full thing where you also want your sleep, for instance, to be. And then we get to the data privacy issues, which is a whole separate issue. So some people would prefer not to have it because then they cannot be tracked.
I mean, you can opt out, right? I mean, or app, you can also opt out, but then again, the features are obviously not working. I always find it funny when people complain about the feature not working, but they deliberately turned off the underlying mechanism to make the feature work, right?
And for me, I mean, I don't have so I think a lot of incremental improvements like what you described are possible. I think previously discussed continuous glucose monitors. If those would be in a wearable, that would be great, but I don't think that's going to be 2026. Don't think it's going to be 2027, maybe 2030 or so. It's just a hard problem to solve.
Exactly.
But let's see how that develops.
How do you think blood pressure will, because this was the same conversation to some degree, how do you think blood pressure will evolve
I think that might be better over time. I think again, instantaneous measurements will be harder, but maybe they will figure out enough correlates to calculate it. Still, I think for most people, just buy a separate monitor, and you're going to get much more reliable data. Though I think Huawei is probably going to keep developing their own wrist device that actually pumps up. Like they, I think, are probably the furthest in the game.
Looks actually not. I mean, I only looked at the website, and when I put it into the show notes, but I looked at it and it looks not as fat as I imagine it. It looks quite sleek, but obviously I don't know in reality how large it is.
It's somewhere standing there, but I can show you later. I have the 1 and 2 here, I think. But I hope that there will be a 3 and that I can test it because I have tendency to high blood pressure, so that would be interesting. I'm a good test subject for that. For the snoring stuff, I'm not so good, but
be grateful for not having too many things.
And I think there's now these high density batteries being developed. I don't know the details, but there's new technologies in batteries that will hopefully improve battery life. For me, battery life is more of a thing than for you. But even my Oura Ring runs out sometimes just because I don't have such a regular charging schedule. And for Whoop, for me, that's just much easier. Like I mentioned Whoop here just because that's the one thing I use myself a lot because it's easy. Because the old Whoop also sometimes ran out. But the new one, it's like even with 10%, I can still go maybe 2 days or so. And it's like so much easier because then you have you get a notification and then you're like, I don't have to do it right now. I can still wait a day or two, which is just nice. And
for Whoop, I think as I read, but this must be 1.5 years ago, and it was for the 2nd generation that they put in
probably the 4th.
It was really long. Okay. Yeah, it was long-ish ago, where there was a new battery technology announced. It was working, not only proposed, it was working. And Whoop was the first end consumer mass product that adopted it very quickly. And I found this interesting because it's to some degree risky, because you don't know, as something established doesn't blow up, as you have told me from this influencer whose Ring, not Aura, I think.
No, it's, I think a Samsung Ring.
Galaxy
I mean, it can probably happen with any ring.
Yeah, that
the battery expands, and that's the danger there, right? Like if it happens to your phone or your watch, you just take it off, it's gone. But
with the ring, it's difficult,
Yeah.
This I found to some degree risky, but also that they really think forward in terms of battery.
I actually don't know if Whoop had this improvement in battery life due to a technology. Now, I didn't look into how they improved their battery life. If it was more software, firmware, not using the battery as much somehow, or if they actually use new technology.
Probably all three, right? I mean, they are smart about the usage. They have just a larger form factor, so they have a larger battery. No, in general,
compared to the previous generation.
And compared to the Ring.
For sure.
And then a third battery technology that, or a new battery technology is the third point. And then all this culminates in this. I mean, what did you say? How long does it?
I think it can last 2 weeks or so. I never really run out anymore now.
Okay, that's amazing.
Quite a while. So that's, for me, a thing now that I didn't. I think if it's daily, then I build a routine. Yeah. But if it's in between 2 weeks and daily, it can become a problem just because it's not long enough that I have the time when I get the notification to charge it.
I get
and I think also because I happen to look at Whoop more often, because I have to look at it each time I start an exercise, I actually notice it. Whereas for Aura, I only look at it when something feels off or is off with Whoop, or if something feels weird.
Yeah.
And so I'm looking at it less as well. Though for a while now, I was also tracking my heart rate during workouts with Aura.
For testing, right?
For testing.
Exactly.
Which I wouldn't, with rings, recommend in general.
Yeah. I mean, my other wishes are just to have all the metrics that we get now, not continuously, just get them continuously. Obviously, this is it's a super... it's not a major step function, but I think having these things, for example, only when you're asleep or only when you don't move and so on, is annoying. And I would like to have a continuous curve for everything for 24 hours to also observe circadian rhythms to some degree. Is it useful? I don't know yet, but I think if we don't have it, cannot detect the patterns, and then we don't know if it's useful or not. But simply having continuous heart rate throughout the day has been shown to be useful for many things. So I'm wondering just if temperature, HRV, saturation of oxygen, these kind of things. For example, Aura only provides you an aggregate metric over the whole night for saturation of oxygen. Apple Watch does it continuously, I think. This is super cool. I just want to have it. If you have the sensor, obviously I know there are limitations and the battery and so on, but I would love to see it throughout the whole day.
And just generally improvements of all firmware on these devices to measure things more reliably. Like even now Apple improved their sleep staging again. And just small things like after you turn off your alarm but you fall back asleep, they will continue tracking, which they didn't do before. Stuff like this, it's like so easy to implement, you would think.
Yeah, exactly.
But you don't know.
They are trying, but we don't know.
So yeah, I think usually we will get incremental improvements this year, which is also expected, and it's also hard to have major improvements. It will only happen every few years that there's a new thing that works really well.
And then we are in a new paradigm with very accurate, continuous tracking of a lot of values, and we're just suddenly there, and then overall it was a step function, but it was due to incremental improvements.
Yes.
In general, I saw at the end of 2025 this, to some degree, a move. It was in the Wall Street Journal of the Aura CEO, the US CEO, that he really lobbied or pushed for less regulation around wearables being informative for medical practice, so that the FDA kind of invents a new category that is not as rigorous as a medical technology or product, but something in between where Aura, Whoop, and so on could apply and get approved, to then have it really as an information and data stream for clinical and medical decision making. And I think this is a very interesting notion. Obviously, they're incentivized by wanting to earn more money and selling more of their products. But they have been also been...
but what were the things they could do that they cannot do now? Did they specifically mention like, these are the 3 things we could implement, but we are not allowed to?
It's not about what they implement, it's more about what they are allowed to claim, I think, that this is really medically relevant, and also to get then by the FDA, which is an extremely valuable, highly skilled and resourceful expert group, company basically. The FDA is the Food and Drug Administration in America, and basically every drug in the world is approved by them, and then everyone else follows suit. And also the same for medical technologies. And getting approval or an approval stamp by the FDA would then really give the clinician, would allow them to use the data to make decisions, right? And I think this is the step they want to take. It's not that they implement a new feature, it's just that the implemented features get validated on a medical rigorous level such that a medical doctor who makes decisions based on this data is not suable, basically. These kind of things. And I think this is a move in the right direction. Obviously, we have to look at the incentives that are driving this, and we don't go too far. But nevertheless, these continuous measurements are informative, are interesting. And there could be something in long-term patterns that cannot be checked in a spot check. And even though if you have a modern physician and you bring them their data, and she looks at the data and then says, okay, let's do a test, and then she does a one spot check test that does not reflect this long-term trajectory, and she can say, sorry, I cannot prescribe you whatever, because in this spot test that we use for clinical decision making, it does not show up. These kind of things, I think, would be unlocked. And I think this could be quite a new game for wearables in general.
That brings back the imperfect data can still have value.
Definitely. Yeah, totally. And it's exactly. And they would have to validate, right? They would have to go through a rigorous, but not as rigorous as a medical product test. But that's why they propose a new category to then actually your Oura could do more. Because I think Oura, and I don't know about Whoop, maybe you know, they had these company programs even as well, that you as a company collaborate with Oura, that every employee who wants gets an Oura ring just as a wellness and fitness device, but also that you get an aggregate statistics of your employees to some degree to can actually improve overall health of your employees and thereby obviously productivity and so on. But they have been pushing in these systemic ways before, and this would also be quite a systemic push.
Yeah, I think other brands also have it. Like Polar has their sort of Polar Loop-like device, but it's called a bit different. But basically much of the same sensors. And it's more for companies, for all employees to wear it that, I guess, opt in. But it exists.
Yeah, it's cool.
Super interesting. We had one more topic, but maybe we can move that.
I think
enhanced games. We can move to the next one. So we have a new catchphrase.
Yes.
Or we used to use these quotes, but now we sort of wanted to make it more general and comprehensive, that we can have a general statement that makes sense.
Exactly, and we sign off in a consistent manner to you guys.
So you can introduce it.
Okay, I will. And this was our podcast. And as always, be your best N of one for yourself and each other. And never forget to have fun doing it. See you next time.
See you next time.
Bye.